Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. In this special edition, as the US-Israeli war with Iran continues, we're focusing on the toll it's taking on women and children across the Middle East. Scores of civilians have already been killed in the region, with Iranians counting for the majority of deaths, countless others having been injured. In the meantime, the UN says millions of Iranians have been forced to flee their homes, while more than 700,000 people have been displaced in southern Lebanon. This as Israel opened a new front after the Iranian-backed group Hezbollah began firing rockets into Israel. And as is the case in so many conflicts, women and children are among those most deeply affected. Joining me now to discuss this from London is Jasmine El-Gamal, a former Pentagon advisor, and Tara Kangarlou, an Iranian-American journalist. Thank you to both of you for joining us. Tara, let me start with you. As an Iranian-American, it must be exceedingly difficult to watch events unfold in Iran.
You know, it takes me back to something that is very near and dear to my heart, and is something that I devoted my entire career to. My first book, The Heartbeat of Iran, was on, and that is the people and the importance of humanizing individuals whose lives are affected by the policies that are made by those who oftentimes don't have the well-being and interests of individuals at the heart of their work, and that is my personal view. And having covered the region in depth since 2014, I can tell you, Annette, that I don't think we have seen a case in modern history where airstrikes and bombs have brought peace, prosperity, and democracy to any society. And I'm afraid that might be the case with Iran as well.
Jasmine, one of the major criticisms of this war is not only the lack of an exit strategy, but the fact there seems to be no discussion about the day after. A clear sign that once again, civilians, especially women and children, are going to bear the brunt of this war.
That's right. And in fact, there was an office in the Pentagon and an effort that was sort of building up that started a few years ago that was focused especially on civilian casualties in conflict, and sort of trying to put together best practices on how to minimize civilian harm in conflict, and training military personnel who would be going on into future conflicts, potentially, to learn those best practices. That effort was dismantled, essentially, by the current Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. And you also have heard him talking almost, with pride about how he loosened the rules of engagement so that the military wasn't hindered when they were going into these conflicts. All of that the brunt of that of those decisions are borne by civilians in the region. Women and children in particular, children obviously the most defenseless of civilians, but also women, because women are caretakers of their families. And so often in conflict, as you both know, when men are sent out to fight, the women are left behind to take care of the family, to take care of the children, to pack the home up when they are displaced or forced to evacuate, as you're seeing in Lebanon right now. Within Iran, hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced, and it is often women who bear the brunt of getting the family together and moving from place to place. None of those issues that I just mentioned and Tara mentioned are discussed in military planning briefings and conversations when the decision is made to go to war.
Tara, in every case, war disrupts essential services, as we know, raises the risk of gender-based violence and endangers women-led organisations and emergency workers. Yet in Iran, years of sanctions and repression by a brutal regime has only amplified the impact this time around, hasn't it?
We have to understand that Iran is a country of 90 million, right? And in no shape or form, it's a monolithic society. However, more than 50% of the population are living below the poverty line. And that leaves us to a population of plus 20 million who are suffering from poverty. All the while, Annette, Jasmine, as you both know, Iran has been suffering from a mental health crisis. And this is something that I've been reporting on for some time now. 20% of the population suffers from some form of depression and anxiety. And suicide rates, by the way, in the past 7 years have risen, with 50% being under the age of 50. So that tells us something, that the Iranian society is fatigued, is disillusioned, and also angry at the government, at the regime, that so many of them, so the majority of the Iranian public wants to move beyond, as well as the lack of trust that they have toward foreign governments. And that pressure point is indeed, as you mentioned, sanctions. So the feeling and the sentiment among ordinary Iranians is complex. And it takes me to the point that I always say, multiple things can be true at the same time. Majority of the Iranian public are angry at the regime. They no longer want to see the Islamic regime as it stood. But of course, we're seeing a more hardline and emboldened version of the IRGC with the presumed new leader, Mojtaba Khamenei. And on top of that, you have a society that is being targeted by these attacks.
Jasmine, there's a very high risk, especially at the moment, isn't there, that this war will continue to escalate?
Unfortunately, I think we will continue to see this conflict escalate. And of course, the ramifications for the people of Iran, for the people of the region, as Iran continues to activate its proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Houthis have not yet fully entered this war. If they do, that is another country being dragged into it. And of course, we have the impact in Gaza as Israel shuts down the Rafah crossing and is preventing any food from going in, medical assistance, under the guise of this war with Iran. So yes, unfortunately, the human suffering, I think we can expect to see continue. People always talk about Lebanese women, and indeed women across the region, as Tara was just mentioned, in Iran, about how resilient they are. And there's almost this resentment, it's like, we don't want to be resilient. Stop celebrating the fact that we're resilient. We are being held hostage by men and their decision making and the way it affects us. This is not about resilience. Let's stop talking about resilience and start talking about why we are being forced to be resilient time and time again.
It does seem that regime change is looking increasingly unlikely, doesn't it?
Indeed. And the way I look at it is that they eliminated the long-standing supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, who was and will forever, quite frankly, be regarded as a theocratic dictator for the majority of the Iranian public. But, Annette, he is now replaced with a younger, more hardline, and more emboldened version of himself. But the point is that the regime in Iran is more emboldened, and perhaps the most radical and hardline factions, we can easily say, are in charge. And again, what has been weakened is the civil society, ordinary people who, again, for the longest time expressed their grievances toward the government and mostly have been suffering economically. And mind you, I think this is important for our viewers to understand that while this war has been waging for the past however many days, Iran has been selling more than 11 million barrels of oil through the Strait of Hormuz to China. So again, we are reminded that while governments, play their political games, and when objectives are, set, but the method and trajectory is unclear, it's the people and their lives who are going to be affected.
Jasmine, your thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, Trump made a really big miscalculation when he entered into this war, which is that he fell into the trap of thinking about the adversary from his own perspective, not from the adversary's perspective, not putting himself in the shoes of the Iranian leadership and thinking how they would react to being attacked, to being put on the spot with ultimatums, to being asked to unconditionally surrender. He didn't think through those steps. And as a result, the Americans were unprepared for the extent of the Iranian retaliation and the extent of their will to continue fighting. And all Iran has to do to claim victory is survive.
And here's a question for both of you. Would you agree that greater female political leadership globally might influence the likelihood or nature of such wars and conflicts? Tara, what do you think?
The greatest power that exists in almost all of the countries that we're looking at is its civil society. I'm not sure about the female leadership around the world. Quite frankly, we don't have that many female leaders right now who can have a big influence in what's happening. But as I've always said, if we understand that the greatest assets of countries are its civil society, and in the case of Iran, the Iranian women and the demographic that are made up of young, vibrant, educated, energetic women and also men are perhaps the greatest asset of Iran. And I can say that easily about the region. So I hope the day comes when people in any country that we're discussing right now or in the future take the lead in determining how they want their futures to be, because I can promise you it's going to be very different than what we're seeing now.
Jasmine?
I'm reading a statistic here that empirical evidence suggests that women's participation in peace processes increases the possibility of a peace agreement lasting 2 years by 20% and lasting 15 years by 35%. Peace agreements with female signatories also have higher implementation rates and focus more on political reform, and yet women continue to make up a small minority of peace negotiations. So I think that's the answer to your question, Annette.
And we're going to have to leave it on that note. Thank you very much. I want to thank both Tara Kangarlou and Jasmine El-Gamal. And that's it for this edition. So until our next show, bye for now.